It's almost midnight at the time I'm recording this review, so let's call this a late night review, and this one would be about the Lenovo K6. To cover one thing first, in which price range is this phone competing with other phones? Since I couldn't find a proper price in the US, I would consider something at around 160 to 180, so kinda in between, or maybe Moto G4 Play and also an Honor 5C, just so we have covered that. But otherwise, I would say let's take a look at the phone and see what we got here. In terms of design and build quality, I definitely think it looks quite nice, absolutely no problems. Build quality is actually very nice, because as you can see here, it only creaks on really heavy banding and pretty not really noticeable at all. A little bit of a creak is in the middle because there it feels a little bit hollow, but in just normal use it feels absolutely solid, actually quite premium. I definitely like that. One thing I don't like so much is, as you can see, we have a curve here, we have a curve here, and everything is a very smooth transition. And since pretty much all of this here is aluminum, just the top and bottom is plastic for better reception, it is kind of slippery. And I actually tweeted about it and said it's just a matter of time until I drop it. Didn't happen, since the phone itself is quite compact, therefore easy and secure to hold. But it is aluminum, it is a little bit slippery, and due to all the curves that aren't really flat here and they don't really provide you so much grip, something that I wanted to point out. One thing that is quite nice here is definitely the placement of the power button and volume rocker. Maybe the power button a little bit on the lower side, but it still works quite okay in my opinion. Therefore though, as you can hear, nice tactile and also audio feedback. In terms of the fingerprint reader, it's maybe not the fastest one, but if you just normally take it out of your pocket, it's pretty much always on. And as you can also see here with an animation, it kind of tries to hide it. It's not the fastest one, but what it is very reliable, and that's already good enough for me. Here we have the LEDs, the camera, as you can see, it sticks out just a bit. We also have the micro USB, this time on the top, something a little bit uncommon, but yes, it works still, after all, no problem. Headphone jack, we have the SD card and SIM card tray, and on the bottom we can see the microphone and the speakers on the back. Not the best placement, actually the second worst one, but why that's not a huge issue I will tell you a little bit later on. Otherwise, we have on the front, as you can see, a little bit of a black border. Maybe not as small as the bezels in overall, but since it is quite compact, I gotta say the bezels are moderate. We have capacitive buttons on the bottom with the back button on the right side, and we have a notification LED, but it's white only, so just keep that in mind. So I still think for the price, absolutely nice design build. Can't really complain, not at all. About the display, it is in this price range, which is nice to see, a 1080p IPS display, 5 inches, and an actually really nice one. Okay, we maybe don't get too much options in terms of the color mode, because we only have normal, which is a little bit more realistic, felt a little bit boring to me, but it is quite natural, and we have the vibrant mode that I think is actually a really nice balance, because yes, maybe a little bit saturated, but absolutely nice, because the whites really pleasantly calibrated, not too warm, not too cold. Even though color temperature control would have been nice, the blacks are absolutely nice. We have a minimal normal amount of IPS glow. Maximum brightness, I would say, is at least okay, if not actually good. Viewing angles are stable enough, so it is a very nice display. Especially the colors don't look at all washed out or dull or so. Actually really nicely balanced. And this is something that makes me say it is a very nice display, the least. Now, what about the speaker here? Let's show it off. One thing that you could have seen, it's actually both speaker holes that actually are with a speaker beneath that, and that is nice. Maybe it's just one, but at least it sounds on both sides, even if you block one on the other side. And I have to say, something I didn't expect, because I don't like backfiring speakers, because usually they tend to sound a little bit weird. But I have to actually say that this one works out quite good, because first of all, it's very loud for especially a backfiring one, as kind of impressively loud, and as long as you have something that reflects it, it actually sounds also very nice in terms of the balance, because quite warm, rich, but also quite clear and detailed. If you don't do it, then it sounds maybe a little bit muffled, but if you have your hand somewhere at around this place, it actually sounds decent. The headphone jack is the same thing here, because one thing that I want to show off, if we go into the settings here, if we go into ringtones, we have Dolby Atmos, and this software actually makes quite an improvement in terms of the headphone jack, because as you can see here, of course, we have the volume leveler, dialogue enhancer, and we have a manual equalizer, and this lets me at least say it is an okay headphone jack. It could be louder, a little bit more amp would, or higher amp used would have been nice, but itself the quality, especially due to Dolby Atmos working quite nice, at least the sound is good. So on a headphone, maybe a little bit tight, but earphone should be no problem, and this is okay. So what about the performance? Let's kill all the apps, and before you panic and see that the last apps are in this card view, this is no problem. We can change that, and I will show this later. But now let's see the launch times. And as you can already see, this is not super fast. But in this price range, I would still say at least average, if not slightly above. So no real complaints here. Now, if we launch the browser and check that one, rendering times are usually absolutely fine, no problems at all. This is due to my Wi-Fi, a little bit slower, so just give that a little bit. And as you can see here, scrolling usually is absolutely fine. Maybe at first, once it is cached in, there is a little bit stutter, but otherwise, as you can see here, scrolling works nice. One thing that I have to mention though is that the scrolling is a little bit weird in some apps. Maybe not quite visible here, but if I just use it with one hand, one other thing that I've noticed is, especially on a faster flick, it behaves a little bit weird. Sometimes you make a small flick and it scrolls a lot, and then you make pretty much the same flick and it scrolls way further. So it is something that I think you will have to get used to. I, after more than a week, still have a little bit of that. As you can see here, sometimes it abruptly stops, and sometimes, as you can see here, now it did, and sometimes it doesn't. So this is something that you will have to get used to, because the scrolling on its own is absolutely nice and smooth. As you can see here, especially something that I did not expect from a 430 Snapdragon with a 1080p display, because the Asus Zenfone 3 laser that I had didn't run nearly as smooth as this one. This only has, as I said, the slightly odd scrolling behavior that maybe you can get used to. Shouldn't be a problem. It didn't really bother me that much after a week, but it was still noticeable. So that's it. One thing that I have to mention is that the RAM management is actually quite okay, but we still only have 2 GB of RAM, so apps will reload quite often. So a jump to a 3 GB device definitely will make quite a noticeable impact in the overall experience. But the gaming performance, I have to say, is actually not that far off from something like a Snapdragon 625, because yes, a few apps sometimes have problems, but if it's a nicely optimized app, like for example our game Riptide Renegade, it actually runs totally fine, just maybe minor, a little bit less frames, but therefore very consistent compared to a Snapdragon 625. Sometimes games like Asphalt Extreme were a little bit harder to play, on some tracks though quite fine, so not a real problem. And Modern Combat, I have to say, once again worked quite okay, a little bit noticeably less frames than a 625, but still actually quite close to a mid-ranger, and due to no heating and all, since it is very efficient, I have to say the gaming performance, at least in this price range, is still absolutely acceptable. What is definitely above acceptable is though the battery. But first of all, a full charge takes about 2 hours, and if not, the proper specs will be on the side. I can't remember quite exactly, but 10% for 1 hour of YouTube is absolutely okay, especially considering the normal battery life, which I would call grade plus. You can see my estimates here on the sides, and this is definitely absolutely fine. About 1 hour less over the course of 2 days. I have no complaints. This is what I call grade plus, and with a really good standby drain, it is almost not even noticeable, since for a 5-inch or 3000 mAh battery makes a great job. Now, let's go into the software. And let me quickly change the launcher just so you can see the original one, but it's nothing really exciting. As you can see, we have an app drawer, side-scrolling one, and we have the apps here, as you can see. So absolutely nothing special, but it gets the job done if you want to. We have, as you can see, a quite stock looking design here in terms of the quick settings. You can rearrange them, as you can see here. It is a little bit different because you have actually more visible on one page than you have on stock. If we enter the settings, there is not too much to show here, but what is there, I actually like, because if you check the features, we have quick snap, so a double press on the volume rocker to snap a picture, we have double tap to turn on the screen, we have smart scenes, we have white touch, which is kind of an overlay button that gives you extra functionality. As you can see, if we would have this here, now you would have extra options you can set, and I've showed this already in the Lenovo P2 review, like switches for example, where we have the quick settings available here, and this is actually quite a nice thing. I personally don't really use it, but it's definitely something that I know to appreciate. If we go back again and actually turn it off, because I don't need it at the moment, it's just in the way. We have fingerprint snap, as you can see here, reader acts as a shutter button, we are switch mode, dual app profile, and you can see the rest. So absolutely okay in terms of that. Notification, of course you can rearrange the buttons, you have display percentage and a lot more, as you can see here. So it definitely offers everything that stock Android does, but with a nice few enhancements, like we have seen already. Dolby Atmos, we have, even though quite limited, a color mode, and as you can see here, we have some LED notification settings. So I definitely find to be the software very good, because it's very nicely optimized. It doesn't hinder the performance at all. It's minimalistic, it's straightforward, it works just as intended. So good job. Okay, let's talk about the camera here. And as you can see here, I have to say, selfies actually turn out to be quite nice and sharp. Color reproduction looks okay. Not really anything to complain. Actually a quite good selfie cam. Yeah, and as you can see here, one thing though to mention is in artificial light, which is a little bit of unfortunate in my studio here, you will see that the white balance is quite off, because here you can see pretty much the same shot and the white balance is quite off. So this is more noticeable, especially here as well. Low light shots and white balance is not its strength. This was with a shot with a flash and this without. Low light capabilities aren't all that great, and especially as you can see here, if you have a steadier hand, it turns out to be actually okay, decent. There's definitely no problems at all, but you really need that steady hand, because you will see this whenever you shake. And I have to say, my outcome was a little bit wonky, because sometimes, as here for example, I had quite some nice shots, and sometimes I needed a little bit more shots to get a good one, because as you can see, the weather was not good because it's very snowy outside and we can get decent pictures. So I would definitely call it at least a decent camera. With better lighting it should be better, definitely, but something like a Moto G4 Play definitely knew to impressed me quite a lot more, but it's absolutely decent. I can't really complain. As you can see here, not so steady, and this is quite detailed, so absolutely fine. So it's definitely not the deal breaker here. There are better cameras available in this price range, but this one, in my opinion, gets the job done just fine. Now, as you can see, the video, in my opinion, is absolutely okay, because it's not super sharp, it's not super detailed, but it's quite smooth, and we have actually quite subtle one pump autofocus that works actually quite reliable, because I have no complaints here. As you can see here, there is a pump, but it's in most cases, like for example here now, actually quite subtle, and this is still nice to see. And it is reliable. As you can see, we didn't have the best weather, so the better the weather, which sounds weird, the better the results should be. So still okay. I've seen even worse, so no problems here at all. This, in my opinion, would be good enough. So let's talk about the pros and cons. On the pro side, we definitely have the good build quality. Absolutely fine for this price, actually almost better than expected. We also have a very reliable fingerprint reader, maybe not the fastest one. We have a really nice display. I would kind of call it even more so, but there are better ones out there, but I have no complaints here. It is fully satisfying, nicely saturated, great sharpness, and in this price range you don't see that all that often. In this actually quite good quality. And then the speaker, even though not in my favorite position, works out actually better than intended, because it's very loud, it's rich, fully satisfying. Headphone jack was okay as well. The performance is at least good. I would maybe already even given it a very good without the odd scrolling, because that kinda had an impact in my performance experience, but other than that, really good. The battery life is great plus for sure. The software, I said it already, I like the clean minimalistic approach with some nice actually useful enhancements, and then we have a quite good front camera, at least if not better, decent back camera, and an after all solid value. Now, what's to be called out on the bad side? And this, of course, is always subjective or maybe not that important, but to be called out, it creaks. Or it feels a little bit hollow in the middle here in the center. But like I said, that's why it's in brackets. It's nothing that you usually in normal in-hand use ever feel. So this is fine. It is quite slippery all around. It was a little bit of a concern for me for the first day. Once I got used to it, especially if I don't have, due to the cold here, very cold and dry hands, it actually feels quite easy to hold on. So not a real problem. Could have been actually maybe even in brackets, but it is noticeably more slippery than some other phones, especially since it doesn't have the parallel sides. Then one thing that I did not mention, because this is something that I usually just keep for the pros and cons, YouTube is out of sync. It's just minimal, and most people won't even notice it, but I had the same issue on the Lenovo P2, and most people never noticed it, never seen it until I pointed it out. There is a minimal delay. I didn't really bother, but I at least wanted to call it out. Odd scrolling, I've talked about that, something that you have to get used to. It's just weird. I don't get why they did it, because I have not seen such an odd behavior ever before. Because it's not consistent. Sometimes you make the same flick twice with a different turnout. And then there are better cameras available after all. This leads me to the end. Is it recommendable? In this price range, if you don't want to import a phone, absolutely, because it is in some way, at least on a level of a Moto G4 Play that I liked a lot. It's maybe a little bit more expensive, but therefore you get the way nicer 1080p, so higher res display. The build quality feels also nicer in the hand. We have a fingerprint reader that works out really great. Sound is actually better than on a G4 Play. It's just the camera that falls a little bit short, and the performance that felt a little bit weird due to the scrolling. But other than that, it can at least hold up to that. And it is worth the extra money over it, I think so. Then there is a kind of like a Honor 5C that is at least on par in some aspects, also the better camera. But in terms of performance, I like this one a little bit more, and the overall experience was actually quite nice. So it is definitely recommendable. But in case you have no problem importing a phone, there are phones like the Xiaomi Redmi 4 Prime that give you still so much more, even way better battery life, a better camera, better in-hand feel, and so on. So I kind of think you get it, but this is available, I think, internationally, at least I think so, even though I couldn't find the prices. But it definitely doesn't have to be imported, which is a problem because of warranty, flashing ROMs, and so on. So not bad. And with a few minor tweaks, just maybe the scrolling, that is something where I'm usually very subjective on and very picky. My experience would have, or my overall experience would have been even way better. But I have to say, what I've gotten here, satisfying, absolutely, for this price. I don't really know much competition that is so strong. That would have been it. If you liked the review, thumbs up, comments down there below, and a subscription, and otherwise, a nice day. Bye.